Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Behind the Reel, where we take a look at certain films, dish out some commentary, some trivia, as well as some cheeky goofs seen in the films. And today we're kicking things off with Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984, and eventually the rest of the Elm Street franchise. The Elm Street films have such a rich history, and the movie trivia behind each one ranges from incredible to just downright bizarre, but all in good time. Essentially, the success story of this film is nothing short of amazing, defying all odds with a next to nothing budget, and the success of this film spawned an entire franchise, all centered around the dream demon himself, Fred Krueger, a filthy child murderer who was burned alive by the angry parents of Elm Street. Freddy takes revenge out on the parents who burn him alive by going after their remaining children. In their dreams. The film starts with the building of Freddy's infamous razor glove, consisting of Type M copper pipe finger stalls, a brass backplate, a filthy leatherwork glove. Adorned upon the armature are 4 Case XX P210 tomato knives that had their handles removed and brazed on upside down. Now these hands you see building the glove aren't Robert Englund's. That's set carpenter Charlie Blodnelli, who also helped build the glove for the film. This was filmed towards the end of production, and Charlie had the perfect sized hands to stand in for Fred. In an interview recently with Blodnelli, he went on to say,
"So how did you become first Freddy?"
So I'm walking around, I forget what I was doing, and they had a little splinter unit going on. They had a table with all the Freddy props, as if he was making the glove. All of a sudden I hear my name, "Hey Charlie, come on over here. Let's see your hands." "Okay, he's good. Get him over to makeup." Well, all of a sudden the sweater goes on me, put makeup on my hands, had a razor cutting the glove, and Bob England comes over to me. He goes, "Charlie, I want you to think sick." Think sick, Charlie.
We're then introduced to Tina Gray, played by a 24-year-old Amanda Wyss, whom we think is going to be the heroine of the story. But guess again. Tina is being stalked by Fred Krueger in his boiler room, played by a then 36-year-old character actor by the name of Robert Englund. Now, if you don't know the story of how Wes Craven designed Fred, here are the cliff notes. The name Fred came from a kid who bullied Craven back in school. The fedora came from a time when an old drunk wearing a similar hat scared Craven as a kid. The colors of the sweater come from a science magazine where the human eye struggles to process red and green side by side. Craven also thought instead of a killer with a mask, have them feature a mask of scar tissue with a personality. And the glove? Well, it comes from times of caveman fearing saber-toothed tigers. Plus the fact that it wasn't a chainsaw or a butcher's knife. It was something he made himself. This location was the Lincoln Heights Jail in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles. The building still stands today, but unfortunately is condemned due to asbestos in the pipes and structure of the building. So you just know full well the cast were breathing some good quality air down there. Freddy gets the last laugh in this nightmare by sneaking up on Tina, and if you're watching the full screen version of the film, you can actually see Robert Englund sneaking up behind Amanda Wyss. Wes Craven said at the time, fuck it, widescreen will be a thing soon, we can just crop it. Now there's actually some alternate footage that was filmed of Mr. Krueger stalking Tina that's just downright creepy, as well as some shots of the glove hooked up to a car battery to create sparks. The next day we see some jump rope girls, and yes, I've actually jumped air rope there, don't judge me. We're introduced to Nancy, played by Heather Langenkamp, Rod Lane, played by Jesus Garcia, and Glenn Lance, played by some random.
Someone has a lot of time on their hands.
Yep. Tina convinces Nancy and Glenn to stay over to keep her company after her creepy nightmare, where they discover that they're dreaming about the same guy wearing a dirty red and green sweater. And before they can compare any more nightmare notes, they hear a sound outside, and Johnny Depp, along with his moose hair, goes to investigate, only to be spear tackled by Rod, who is just doing a little light yard work. Rod drags Tina inside, and that's not the only time she's going to be dragged. With Glenn being couched by Nancy, who is sleeping in Tina's room, complete with a state-of-the-art spandex Fred feature wall. That's right, all this shot took was a panel of spandex and mechanical effects engineer Jim Doyle to press his face through. So practical and simple. I can only imagine how good this will look in 26 years time when they recreate it with CGI. Oh fuck, never mind. Tina awakens to a noise. So it's little shit kids throwing rocks at the windows again. And here we are reintroduced to Fred Krueger, arms splayed out whilst demonstrating his spark skills. This arm effect was achieved by having prop arms mounted on poles with crew members on either side holding them up with fishing poles. Cinematographer Jacques Haken said the whole thing looked so ridiculous when they filmed it, but upon viewing the dailies, it looks so strange and otherworldly, so much so that it worked, and it went on to become one of the most iconic shots of the film. Fred goes on to deliver his infamous "This is God" line, accompanied with the clearly obvious plastic stunt glove without the fingers riveted together. And this was essentially to ensure Englund didn't cut his face with the sharp hero glove. Fred chases Tina down the alleyway back into a backyard where we see a good old-fashioned mirror trick and Mr. Krueger making some fingers disappear. And that green stuff shooting out from his stumps? That's car coolant.
Look, all better for me, but not for you.
Now, what's not already been said about Tina's death? It's hands down one of Freddy's greatest kills, and the fact that it's the first kill cab off the rank is even better. The chest slash effect was done by attaching 4 pieces of filament string to the top of the chest and pulling down on the rubber casting, creating an invisible slash effect. The effect of Tina being dragged up the wall was achieved by the crew creating a revolving room with all the set dressings glued and sprayed down. And all that aside, there was alternate footage shot that included Robert Englund dragging Tina up the wall, as if we see it from her perspective, as opposed to him being invisible in the final cut of the film. I'm not gonna lie, I really dig this footage. The lighting, the way Robert's teeth are clenched through David Miller's amazing makeup, it all works. But according to Englund, he said the alternate footage was indeed included in a test screening, but was deemed too scary. So they went the invisible route. The MPAA had a field day with this particular shot, having Craven cut the moment blood splashes up from the mattress once the stunt actress hits it. Rod freaks out and bails before Nancy and Glenn barge in to see the new paint job Freddy has done, and I believe this color is called Tina Rouge. At the police station, we're introduced to Nancy's parents, Marge, an alcoholic played by Academy Award nominee Ronnie Blakely, and her father, Lieutenant Donald Thompson, played by the late and badass John Saxon. Fun fact, this isn't actually a police station. This is actually the main office of a school, John S. Burroughs Middle School as a matter of fact. Also, why the fuck would anyone use a clear body bag, let alone air the footage on breakfast TV? Oh look kids, your favourite show's on TV! As Nancy makes her way to school, Rudd does a hey you behind the bushes and pulls her off the sidewalk. After trying to convince Nancy he didn't kill Tina, Lieutenant Thompson does a dirty Harry and nearly makes his day before he bails. And all of a sudden becomes a professional ventriloquist with some shonky ADR as he's arrested. I'm cool. We then cut to Nancy's school when a young Lin Shaye teaches Hamlet. Nancy falls asleep and descends into a nightmare, seeing Tina in that clear body bag in the hallway. And as Nancy chases after Tina, she bumps into the hall monitor who's wearing a Freddy sweater that has one less green stripe than his regular 5 stripes. I'm not sure what happened there. I guess the stripe budget ran out. So when Nancy goes down the stairs, she actually goes from the middle school location back to the Lincoln Heights boiler room location. Frederick makes another appearance before showing off his maggot collection and the blending line of his makeup featuring an unpainted wound. Whoops. When Fred corners Nancy, he scrapes his glove on the pipe, and you can see 4 rubber bands holding the armature onto the leather glove. This scene was filmed relatively early on in production, and the hero glove? Well, it wasn't actually finished yet. It was still missing its brass ringlets. The crew needed the close-up hero prop ASAP, so they slapped some rubber bands on it and off they went. After Nancy burns her arm on a pipe to wake up, she goes to see Rod to pick his brain about what really happened with Tina. Actor Jessil Garcia said in the Elm Street documentary Never Sleep Again that this scene, he was high as a kite on drugs, and thankfully to this very day, he has remained sober. Later that night, Nancy is relaxing in the tub when she falls asleep and an unwanted bath toy emerges from between her legs. This hand belongs to mechanical effects engineer Jim Doyle, who also helped design and build the glove for the film. The bathtub itself was rigged onto a tank so Jim could go under the water and pop his hand up. And yes, that is indeed the real metal glove. Makes you cross your legs and cringe, huh? And as for the shots of Nancy being dragged underwater, by the way, that was not Heather Langenkamp, were done by covering a swimming pool with black PVC plastic sheeting. Now, after her relaxing soak in the tub, Nancy watches Bruce Campbell to calm her nerves, swiftly followed by Jack Sparrow entering through her window.
Come to negotiate, eh? Have you slimy git?
Nancy convinces Glenn to watch her while she sleeps, to see if she can find Rod or Mr. Crispy himself. As she enters the dream world, she goes for a wander. She sees Rod asleep in his jail cell. Fred decides to mosey on in and pull a T-1000, gliding through the bars. Funny thing is, the Elm Street sign is never seen in the final cut of the film. However, there was footage shot of Nancy walking past the street sign. This was done as a second unit shot by none other than Sean S. Cunningham, director of Friday the 13th. A chase ensues that ends up back at Nancy's house with some mixed up Bisquick batter thrown in the mix, an idea from producer Bob Shea. Fred and Nancy decide to have a feather fight, but an alarm clock swiftly brings that to a halt. And as you can see here, there were some extra shots filmed of Freddy choking Nancy that didn't make the final cut of the film. Convinced that something bad is about to happen to Rod, Nancy and Glenn head to the police station. But it's too late, as a haunted bedsheet wraps itself around Rod's neck, and this was all done in reverse with a wire threaded into the sheet. It still looks pretty good and holds up to this day. But before they can get to him, Rod is killed with a swift snap to the neck as he hangs, making it look like he couldn't take the guilt of killing Tina. Rod's funeral was actually the very first day of principal photography and was filmed at the Evergreen Cemetery, which you can find on 204 North Evergreen Avenue, Los Angeles. Convinced something is wrong with her daughter, Marge takes Nancy to the Kaiser Institute for Sleep Disorders, where Dr. Roger Rabbit and nurse Wes Craven's then wife Mimi monitors Nancy's dreams. She struggles when she starts wrestling with the burnt man himself before being awoken, not without taking something from the Kruger gift shop, his filthy hat. Now, the brand of fedora used for Fred in Elm Street 1 was actually a designer collection Godfather style fedora. The good old days where you can just casually smoke in hospitals. Nancy and Glenn share some food on a bridge that is totally in Ohio and not California. Before returning home to see that Mad Marge Thompson has put bars on the windows, and the most over-the-top cheesy way she tells Nancy to come on down to the cellar. She goes on to explain that Fred Krueger was a filthy child murderer who was freed on a technicality. Marge, along with some of the other parents, tracked him down in an old boiler room before torching him. Interesting though, there's a deleted scene that shows Marge telling Nancy that she wasn't always an only child, suggesting that Fred had killed her older sibling. Marge shows Nancy her item she got from the Kruger gift shop, his glove. Now, I never thought I'd be saying this, but Edward Scissorhands pulls off the crop top really well.
Thank you.
Nancy tells Glenn of her plan as she's going to go into the dream world and confront Fred once and for all. All he needs to do is be ready at midnight to whack Fred as Nancy pulls him out of the dream world. But Willy Wonka has other plans. Good old-fashioned sleep.
Yeah.
Unable to get through to Glenn on the phone, Nancy receives a reverse call from F. Kruger, and as you can see, she accepts the charges. This then leads to another famous Freddy kill. Glenn is pulled into his bed where his soupy remains are blasted out of the bed. Johnny Depp has a lot of blood. Must be all that red wine. The crew reused the rotating room from Tina's kill and poured gallons and gallons of red watered down poster paint from the ceiling. Unfortunately, the room overbalanced, as you can see right here, and the room started to sway, as well as electrifying the mixture due to it hitting a set light, shocking some crew members in the rafters in the process. The fake blood eventually flooded out from the window on the set, covering the entire crew, and Wes Craven was quoted as saying afterwards, "This film is fucked, but that was fun."
And that's encouraging.
There was actually an alternate take of Ed Wood coming back out from his bed covered in blood. In my opinion, it just didn't really work.
Yes.
Now, just quietly, I love this line.
You won't need a stretcher up there. You need a mop.
Now, here's an interesting bit of trivia, and one that I find so fascinating. When Lieutenant Thompson goes to inspect the Jackson Pollock painting in Glenn's room, there was an entire subplot cut from the film. The coroner shows L.T. Thompson the finger blade he found in Glenn's bed, clearly from Freddy's glove. This is why throughout the entire climax of the film, Freddy is missing the index stall of his glove. But as we know, this subplot was cut from the film, as Craven thought it was giving too much info to Nancy's dad in regards to who's responsible for these murders. Personally, I feel like that story element would have been a nice touch, but here we are. Anyway, Nancy channels her inner Kevin McAllister and starts booby-trapping the house in preparation for her melty guest. She tucks her mum into bed with a nice role reversal and heads on into dreamland. Wandering around the boiler room, we see some brilliant shots of Freddy stalking Nancy before he finally creeps up on her. With his hat back all of a sudden, oh, it's gone again, okay. Nancy leaps off a set of stairs and lands back in her front yard, swiftly followed by a rosebush boogeyman. Now check out this blooper from this particular scene. Fred is pulled into the real world where he gets his daily dose of caffeine and sledgehammer, swiftly followed by a trip over the banister. And if you're watching the full screen version, you can see the crash mat for the stunty to land on. Krug hits a tripwire and cops a flame to the back, but every time I watch this shot, I just think of Mr. Burns.
Yes.
Also, Did you know that Fred's makeup included wisps of hair? You'd never notice them, but they're there. Nancy leads Clumsy Krueger down into the basement where he's met with another round of flame therapy and a totally non-obvious fireproof stunt mask. This stunt was performed by stuntman Tony Caesar and at the time was the longest fireburn stunt put to film. The bloke is a madman. As Nancy and Papa Thompson head back to the basement, FK decides to take a fiery stroll upstairs to pay a visit to Mad Marge. Again, we see Tony Caesar demonstrating his fire stunt skills. Now that lighting emitting from under Marge's crispy skeleton, well, that's an arc welder. Fred then rises up from the bed and pokes his way out, minus one finger blade, as Nancy strips him of his power. Now here's an alternate take where you can hear Robert Englund's real voice before its modulation in post-production.
And now you die.
And after some badass 80s rotoscoping, everything is back to normal. Or so Nancy thought. Now most of us know about the 3 separate endings that were indeed shot for the end of Elm Street, but the one I most wanted to see in the final cut was that of Freddy playing an Uber driver. 5 stars for sure. The final shot, we see a blatantly obvious dummy of Marge being pulled through the door. And this was actually the very last shot for production. They did it in one take, and with that, it was time to pack up and start the post-production process. A Nightmare on Elm Street went on to gross over $57 million at the box office on a budget of $1.1 million, instantly making Fred Krueger a household name. It put New Line Cinema on the map and gave producer and founder Bob Shea the opportunity to create a very lucrative franchise, and that's exactly what he did. And not even a year later, we got ourselves a sequel. A very, very different sequel. But that's going to have to wait until the next installment of Behind the Reel, where we take a look at A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Until then, love you guts, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.